And now it's perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you are doing great. Hope that your day is going well, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome to everybody who's joining us live. And if you're watching on the recording, thank you so much for being here. We are continuing our series this week on building empathy in sales, talking about how you build relationships with prospects and clients as a sales Sherpa. And it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I posted this on LinkedIn earlier today when I was talking about this message. And I shared that I'm really irritated by all the talk about empathy in sales and how important empathy is in this stressful period that we're in. And here's the reality. Empathy has always been important. We've just gotten away from it, definitely as far as the sales process has been concerned. We've really thought that all we need is the right sales technology, the right sales cadence, the right email automation program. Now AI will tell us the exact time to just reach out to somebody and see if they want to buy from us. That's not the case. All those things are fantastic tools to have in our toolbox. But in the end, sales is all about a human-to-human connection. Because here's also the reality. If you want to make sure that you are employed not only now, but in the future in a sales capacity, and that, by the way, means that you have sales somewhere on your business card, or if you're in any place where you're trying to build business, that could be as an entrepreneur, small business owner, solopreneur, a freelancer, a service provider like an accountant or an attorney who wants to get more business. If you're going to be able to, if you want to be as said, relevant and not be replaced by technology, you have to really leverage these empathetic skills. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I actually want to talk about how do we build these skills. Yesterday, we talked in part 2 about how to actually build empathy in a conversation. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, we have the whole playlist on our YouTube channel. I'll make sure to send the link to that. Definitely check it out. Today, we're going to look at how do you build that muscle? How do you build the empathy muscle? Because here's something that's important to understand. Empathy is both an intuitive and inherent skill that we possess, an attribute, if you will, but it's also something that can be improved with intentional action. So the example I often use is running, right? We can all run. Not some of us not very well. We're not maybe built for it. Some of us are built for running. I ran cross country in high school, and there was like the short, stocky me, like this, like a little square, and then everybody else was like tall and skinny with these huge legs. And obviously, I did not do too well, but I always finished the race. That was my claim to fame. And in fact, I remember sophomore year during the banquet they always have for sports teams in high school, the coach looked at me and was like, and David Fisher, well, he keeps running. All right, he never stops. He's not fast. And I'm like, that's all right. I'll take it. But in the same way, though, you could get better at running if you train, if you work on your diet, if you practice a lot, if you run a lot. And in the same way, with your empathetic skills, if you put time and attention and deliberate intent into building your ability to engage and your ability to connect, that's going to be a big part of what will help you be successful. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In fact, the first thing, and by the way, if you have ideas or questions or anything, feel free to throw those in the comment section for those of you who are watching this live. It also makes me feel like I'm not just speaking into the void, which is always good when you're just cooped up in your home office making a video. It does sometimes feel like you're just talking to yourself, which is something I do quite frequently as well. But so let's talk about a couple simple ways that right now you can start building that empathy muscle. The first is something I kind of touched on just a moment ago, which is the idea of deliberate intent. And I think one of the first steps everybody has to take if you want to get better at building empathy is think to yourself, I want to get better at creating connections between me and other people, specifically in this case, my prospects. What's great is if you build these empathy skills, it does spill over into all the other different parts of your life, right? Your personal life, your friends, your family, non-sales situations, as far as our professional life is concerned. And so there's a lot of benefit to it. So when you actually create the intent behind building these empathy skills, you start to look at things a little differently. And I really think that has to be the basis of this. It's amazing in the last couple months talking with people, even before the pandemic, about how to be successful in business and in a very fluid and uncertain business environment, which, remember, there wasn't a whole ton of certainty even before this pandemic. One thing that came up frequently in a lot of different conversations was the need for self-awareness. And so what being deliberate about improving your skills is all about is creating that self-awareness that, hey, I want to get better at this. So that's step number one. And hopefully if you're even on here today, you've probably made that decision or you realize the value. So the second is a very specific process that you can use to build empathy. And it's called the conversational debrief. The name is not what's important. The action is. And this works really well specifically in your sales conversations. You can apply this to other situations as well. But simply what you do is after a conversation, like let's say it's with a prospect or a client, maybe you just came out of a sales pitch meeting, you've got a few minutes. Sit down and actually ask yourself, do I know why what happened? Okay, it's a very simple question. Do I know why what happened? And there's a number of different ways that you can get to. There's other questions to ask. This is actually a great thing if you do have a sales manager or a sales coach. They can help you with this. They can ask some questions and help you uncover. But you don't need those people. They're helpful, but they're not necessary. To simply ask. I mean, you're basically coaching yourself, and you're saying, okay, this happened. Do I know why what happened, a sale or a no sale, happened? And if you don't, because that's the first step, you go, man, I don't know why. Okay, well, that means that you weren't paying attention. You weren't doing the things we talked about yesterday as far as building empathy. In fact, when I was whenever I'm a sales coach or sales manager for people, one of the things I'll often say is, I don't care if you don't sell, but I get really irritated if you don't know why you didn't sell, because that means you weren't paying attention. Like the statement, oh, they just didn't want to buy right now, means nothing. It means you don't really know what their motivations were. If you could uncover their real motivations and you still couldn't sell to them, that's fine, right? It might not have been a fit at that point, but you have to be able to at least know what their motivation is. So that's that question, that simple process. Even at the end of the day, if you're having a lot of conversations right now, at the end of the day, look at your 3 calls that you had, your 3 Zoom calls maybe, or your sales conversations. Say, and just ask yourself, can I correctly identify why the person acted as they did? By the way, I mentioned, you could even sell and do this. So do I know why they bought from me? And move beyond just, well, because they liked what I offered, and go, what was it that I was solving? I highly suggest that you take a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and actually write this down. Even if it's on a piece of scrap paper, it can also be really handy to do this in like some sort of notebook. You can type it too, that's fine. I'm not saying it's gotta be paper, but if you actually write it, you get out of your head. And so that can be a really powerful way of starting to pay attention to what you did well and what you might not have done so well. This is where you can start to see patterns. And the nice thing about writing it down, if you do have like a notebook or maybe even a file on your computer, do this for 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be forever. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depends on how many conversations you're having. Then go back and look at them. Look at those notes. And what we're looking for is patterns. See what you're good at and see where you've got some gaps. Because that will key you into where you can improve. So for example, when I was a really young salesperson, I actually learned from my manager. He actually came out on a sales call with me, didn't sell. And so, of course, because I was trying to put on like the best show, and he goes, man, I would have sold to that person. And I'm like, why? You think you're so good? I mean, I wasn't like that flippant, but he's like, this person was giving you all these buying signals. You were too busy talking. You weren't paying any attention to them. And like, for me, I mean, it was a very formative experience because I was like, oh, I got to switch. Because I had been a talker and learned in that scenario to be a listener instead. So that's the first step is have this debrief after your conversations. If you have it right after, that's great. If you have it at the end of the day, that's okay too. I wouldn't wait too much longer than that because then we start to forget. But especially when you get frustrated because somebody didn't buy or didn't move forward, that's a great one to look at and go, why didn't they? And sometimes we'll be like, I don't even know the information. So that's a reminder that we have to dive in more. But sometimes we'll be like, oh, you know what? Looking back, I didn't really answer this question for them. I didn't help them with that need that they had, or that I didn't cover that concern. Okay, right? That'll help me moving forward. So that's one idea. And the next idea I'm going to give you, I guess this is number 2, is there's the idea of self-awareness, which came up, and I just kind of touched on this idea of like taking notes. Journaling is actually a really great way of developing your empathetic skills. Now, we talk about journaling right now just in terms of journaling your sales conversations. That can be great. But I'm going to branch this out into even any kind of journaling right now can be super valuable for you. One thing that's really popular is kind of the Stoic philosophy, the journaling that is involved in that. Seriously, Google it. There's a ton of great articles out there about how the Stoics, the ancient Greeks and Romans, used to use like some sort of journaling to help them be aware of the way they were perceiving things. This is really valuable for 2 reasons. One is it creates an empathetic awareness of what your perceptions, what your motivations, what your feelings are. And if you can't know internally how you feel, obviously you can't know with someone else. The second is it really starts keying you in to patterns. And to give you an idea, I actually started journaling in 2001. And so I've got a huge stack. I think I actually wrote an article about this, and I have a picture of like this huge stack of journals. I keep them in my closet. I know my wife really wants to go through them. But I have an advantage. I can leave them out because my handwriting is so bad, she can't read them anyways. But what you're doing is, one, I think there's some emotional benefits to kind of getting your thoughts out, but it allows you to go back and see patterns. And, you know, I've found that one thing that's helped me a lot in my career is just looking at the empathetic abilities that I have towards myself, right? And which sounds a little tree huggerish, a little hippy dippy, but it's so powerful because then I can actually pay attention to the person when I'm in a conversation. Like another thing I found that I would get really defensive with prospects because they would ask just simple, genuine questions, but I would get defensive. They're like, why are they asking me about the price? Why are they doing that? Oh, now I've got to kind of like, you know, double down and sell them. And I started to realize, wait, there's just a defensiveness in me. If I just shut up and pause, maybe even ask them a question. Oh, you know, what you asked about, you know, kind of how long the contract is, you know, what does that stem from, or what's the concern there? What are you worried about? And then instead of being defensive, I was actually having a better conversation. By the way, that took me a couple of years to figure out. So I'm not saying it's like you journal for a day or two and everything's good, but it helped me be a much, much better salesperson. So that's number 2. Number 3, study, right? Study this topic. You know, we've got these LinkedIn Live calls this week. It's a 20-minute call, right? Or calls or sessions. I don't even know what you'd call these, but it's 20 minutes. We're not going to dive into the depths of human psychology in 20 minutes. So put some time, energy, and effort into studying this. I think there's so much amazing material out there right now that there's almost too much. But some areas that I would suggest, this is where you take your sales and business training to the next level by branching out from just reading sales and business books. Two things I would focus you in on is psychology and communications, just general communications. So that could be anywhere from, I love Dan Pink's stuff. I'm kind of a Dan Pink fanboy, and I'm pretty okay with that. He's a pretty cool guy. He actually wrote wrote a blurb for my first book, and I'm very grateful for that. But whether it's Drive, whether it's To Sell is Human, really interesting. He's really diving into that. Malcolm Gladwell, a big one who I tell people about a lot is Dan Ariely. Dan also has a lot of TED Talks. He's got a lot of online information. He's all about what drives and what motivates us, and sometimes the hidden, motivations, right? That's huge. So reading some of this will make your conversations with people much more effective. Same way I look at communications. Influence by Cialdini. I think I'm saying his name right. Cialdini, I don't know. It might be wrong, but the Influence, written a couple decades ago, but still super powerful. Crucial Conversations, another older book that has been really valuable to really help in my conversations with people. I'm trying to think who else. Deborah Tannen, I've actually listened to a lot of her, what are those called? Great lecture series. She talks a lot about communication between genders, which has been really valuable. Helps a lot with my conversations with my wife. There's a lot in there. I can definitely, if you want to get specific recommendations, please just message me afterwards. There's more. I mentioned TED Talks for a moment there. TED Talks, if you're not a reader, and I know that some people aren't, especially if you're in sales, I get it, then go to YouTube, search TED Talk. Sales, TED Talk, influence, TED Talk, communication, TED Talk, psychology. There's so much good information out there. But if you're not putting any time into building your skills, you're not. Like, you wouldn't expect to be in better shape without going to the gym, without looking at your diet, without taking care of your physical body. How can you get better without taking care of your mind? Right? Really simple. And if you want to read these books and you really don't like to read, the other big thing is audiobooks. I know we're not moving around as much anymore, but when we do get to do that again, if you're driving, if you're working out in the gym, pop on an audiobook. It's really, really valuable. Instead, even though these aren't sales and business skills, they apply. The other thing, I guess number 4, I would suggest that you start reading is fiction. Adam, I can definitely add some of those books down into the comments for today's video afterwards. So I'll do that. But again, if I forget or if you don't get to see them, go ahead and message me. But read fiction. And very importantly, read fiction. Don't watch TV. If you want to watch TV for fun, that's great. But I think there's something very powerful. They actually, I heard once that they use fiction to help people understand, like in therapy, understand how to develop the theory of mind, which we talked about on Monday, which is the idea that other people have different perceptions, different motivations, feelings, etc. What fiction does and why it's so powerful, and whatever fiction you want to read is cool. Whether, genre fiction like sci-fi or something like that, or just kind of popular fiction, whatever, it doesn't matter. Classics. What you're really doing is you're trying to get inside someone's mind. You're trying to see how somebody else goes through the world, right? And it's really hard to do that in TV. I was watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off the other day. Fun movie, great blast from the past. And it's kind of an interesting movie because he talks to the viewer and kind of says, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Most TV doesn't do that. So we don't get a glimpse into their motivation. That's actually what reading fiction can allow you to do. And I think you might be like, hey, I don't really read books. Again, if you want to do an audiobook or something, that's fine. But it can't be just a movie. It can't be just a TV, because then you're just seeing people's actions. We want to start understanding people's motivations. And it's very simple, but very powerful way to do that. So those are 4 different ways that you can actually start to build the muscle, right? The empathy muscle, because the more practice, the more deliberate intention you put into it, the better you will get, right? This is not just something you luck into. Yes, some people are naturally better than others at this for a variety of reasons, whether it's genetic, whether it's upbringing, for the whole host of things that go into this. But all of us can improve our skills from where we are. Tomorrow, I'm going to dive into something that I've always found fascinating, which is mirroring and matching, which is this idea that people like themselves. And so if we want to help build that empathetic connection, we can not be inauthentic, but we can make it easier for someone to connect with us. And I think most people do it wrong. Most of the training out there is incorrect and unnuanced. But if you really get the kernel of what you're trying to do, it's super powerful. It makes you, it enables you to have better conversations, and it enables you to be more influential, which is really the purpose of our sales conversations. So I'm going to dive into that in part 4, which we will be doing tomorrow. Or if you're watching the recordings, you'll just see it next in the playlist. As always, thank you for spending time with me. If you've enjoyed these LinkedIn Lives, please tell people. The more I can share this information, again, it feels like I'm not talking into the void, and I like that. If there's anything else that I can help you with, please shoot me a message afterwards. I would also encourage you to check out my website. We have a blog with literally hundreds of articles on sales, networking, relationship building, empathy, all kinds of fun stuff like this. So check that out. And you know what? The big thing, these are stressful times. I get it. The more that you can be patient, be kind, and take care of one another, the better off we're all going to be. I think it's very obvious. I mean, this is week 4 for us here in the Illinois, Chicago area of being on shelter in place. It's not going to change, at least for a little while. And even when it does, the shelter in place goes away. Who knows what the future is? Man, we're all in this really weird space. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And of course, don't go out unless you really have to. And if you do, make sure you say thank you to the people who are keeping things going. The grocery store workers, the delivery drivers, the bus drivers, obviously the healthcare workers. I actually just had to go to Walgreens to get more baby formula for my son. And, I made sure to say thank you to the woman doing checkout, because, hey, she's just as scared as all of us are about these things, but she's coming into work. And I was really appreciative of that. That's all I got. I'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow. And yeah, bye.